Thank you, Madam Clerk. And we will move into our first item of business, Cedar Falls Economic Development Corporation update by Executive Director Jim Brown.
Thanks, Mayor. Great to see everybody in council tonight and, of course, staff. You folks have the report in your packet as far as some details or concerns with, we give an update every 6 months from the EDC to our partnership to the city. I was just going to cover a few items sort of high level and obviously take questions and such as well. So first of all, I wanted to say congratulations on passing the city budget. I'm just confident vast majority of folks don't understand the arduous process that you folks go through to get to the point of having a real sustainable, $125 million budget. It's commendable. And, you know, I've said this in the past, in anyone's budget, it boils down to something very, very simple. Money in and money out. Money in comes with the revenue that you folks generate, that any company generates, or that folks go to work and they get their paycheck. Money out obviously pays for the essential services the city gives, plus hopefully some investments that they put forward as well to continue to have money coming in. But a cure for anyone's budget is growth, is revenue coming in. And so that's one of the key factors and key tenets of the Cedar Falls Economic Development Corporation. How can we help? How can we partner? How can we collaborate to bring that growth to come to the city? Ironically, you might find this interesting. A couple weeks ago, a couple of individuals approached me. I forget what industry they were in, but they said 2 bids came in for a larger project that they were working on, and bids came in 30% lower. So I'm not sure if that's a trend, kind of hope that it is. But it did prompt me thinking, now more than ever, we need that public-private partnership. We see it all over town. We see it with the plaza, the swimming pool, to some degree, UNI, the place to play park, pickleball, you name it, it's all over. And every city that I know of has that public-private partnership. And it's what keeps the city sustainable. That's what you have a river improvement project that starts right now, and in 20 years from now you think back and think, well, who the hell thought about that? It keeps the community sustainable for what's needed at the time, which would be employees, and we want them to stick around. We want the kids to grow up here. So the sustainability of those types of partnerships is invaluable. I did bring something I've mentioned in the past. It's the Future Forward 2025 plan. Not sure if all the newer folks have seen that plan. And I think it matches what you folks came to a consensus with at goal setting, which to the mayor's directive to have some sort of strategic plan. And every community needs that kind of guide. It's unbelievable. It's almost been 10 years ago. But if you look through this guide, all the different investors, stakeholders that were involved in this arduous process that took over the community, it's not as if you need to look at it every day or every week, but it is something there where an individual and organization will look at something and say, you know, we're going to lead the charge to go try to get that thing. And that thing becomes a reality, and that benefits all of Cedar Falls. It's a clear guide for our city, and I think without it, it does hamper future growth. It just does. If you have no direction, you go aimlessly, depending on where you go. And the CFEDC stands ready, willing, and able to collaborate with whatever you folks do in terms of a strategic plan, with the caveat that we just really hope it doesn't hamper the existing or the near future growth that we have. Let's do both. Let's plan and let's grow at the same time. For the future, we're going to continue to communicate with our stakeholder partners, Community Main Street, Kim and her group, College Hill Partnership, V&T, and other businesses. It's crucial to keep a pulse of what's going on in the business world within the 4 walls of Cedar Falls. I also brought with me, and I know each one of you have a copy because I gave it to you, but the economic development is still not for amateurs. Hopefully you read through that. I gave it to council, I gave it to my board of directors, I gave it to P&Z, and I gave it to even staff. There's a chapter in there that really directs staff. You know, some things you do affect this, and some things you do affect that. It's powerful. It's a very simple read. One thing I wanted to point out, one chapter in the book is entitled Grow Your Garden. And our garden are the community the businesses that we have existing right now. We got to grow that. Shane does a hell of a job filling up the South Industrial Park. Keep in touch with people who know to contact him for various things coming up. But this last fall, our organization did a retreat, and I was given the directive to do BEOs. So the business engagement opportunities, again, it's been mentioned in the past, but again, Shane's busy filling that industrial park. My directive is to go talk to these businesses, see what's going on with them, what their plans are for hiring, their plans for expansion, report that back to Shane, our partner, Lisa, our partner at Grow Cedar Valley, and ultimately that information does end up on the desk of the Iowa Economic Development Authority, and they take it seriously. If they see a trend, they want to be ahead of that trend. If it's not a good trend, they want to make sure to halt that and intercept it to make it good. So that's in the future for the BEOs. As you know, a year and a half ago, Shane and I took a visit to the Netherlands, took a swing at some companies. I like to say took swings at the plate for a few companies over there, and one in particular is finding interest in Cedar Falls. While they have not officially chosen Cedar Falls, they continue to ask questions, visit, and plan for some great things in the city. This coming fall, speaking of the future, we plan on making another trip out that direction. Another Netherlands company here in town invested and became a part of the CFEDC, so I grabbed him right away and said, can you help us with an itinerary? And we'll do what we did a year and a half ago, maybe. And so I'll beckon to what City Administrator Gaines says. You know, the baseball analogy is you get to the plate, takes 10 swings at the plate. If you have 3 base hits, you're an all-star. Well, we're 1 for 1, so why the heck wouldn't we try it again to go over there and take some swings and see if we can get some other companies interested in Cedar Falls. You know, we've always been a cut above the rest here. I'll caution you, our housing starts are not where they should be. Our new taxable valuation, I hope we can spur some things the next couple months to get to that magic $100 million mark. But that's just minimum what we should be looking at. So once again, the CFEDC is ready and a willing partner to invest in our community for the future, as we have seen it in the past with optimism and success. So that's my brief update. Again, you folks have the report. Take any questions you might have at this time.
All right. Thank you, Jim. And we'll open it up to council questions, comments, discussion.
Mr. Mayor.
Yep. Councilmember Cruz.
Thank you. Jim, on number 4, housing initiatives, 1,000 new dwellings by 2030. I know you touched on it there. We're kind of behind. Is it a big factor of contractors? We don't have that many contractors to build 1,000 homes?
Well, I think
166 a year for 6 years. So.
Yeah, no, and one distinction, that's a great point. One distinction is I think technically in the assessment, it's 1,000 dwellings. So if you double up with some density, if you double up with...
Duplex, fourplex?
Yeah, those sorts of things. It's a good goal. We had monthly meetings with a task force that I put together. We put together, EDC, and with the city staff, and we had maps out there and just sort of what does this look like? Is it even possible? And it is, but it's a big chore to get to that point.
Go ahead.
Another thought I heard different times over the last couple of years about our lot costs compared to the communities around us, or double in some cases. If we want to look at the costs that are dictated by energy savings or infrastructure, I hear this in Des Moines when I talk down there with the legislators and the home builder people down there in Des Moines. That's an area that I think would make a big difference in our costs, because if we're double or triple in our lot to start building, then neighboring communities, that's a big deterrent.
Yeah, we start off kind of behind.
Yeah.
I think a couple of things with that. One is hopefully you folks are presented with potential incentives. I know the communities that surround us, they incentivized housing a couple of years ago, and they're off and running, getting the lot costs down. We also took a look at Dubuque is doing a good job with keeping the lot cost down as they established housing TIFs. A percentage of that TIF increment comes back. It has to go to LMI, the low to moderate income portion that they designated. I think it's near their downtown. So by default, growth with the housing TIF brings in, I don't know, the McMansions or whatever, but part of those dollars have to go to the LMI to get those lot costs down. So the average cost of the home isn't $375, it's $275. So a lot of factors at play, a lot of domino effects at play, whether it be, houses that are between here and you and I, the old houses, getting those generated up through the middle class, up through the higher end homes, that sort of things. And like I said before, the density part too helps.
One other thing I noticed, I'm not sure number 8 if you're what you're alluding to there, a task force focused on streamlining city development processes, developer-friendly environment, if you're referring to, the lot costs and those sorts of things, or, the bad words of form-based zoning, the viewpoint of that. You've got a zoning review board where the decision is made in many people's eyes as non-transparent. You don't get to see what's built. There's no comments there. And I came across a brochure when I was working in Des Moines with the home builders, from the national home builders, talking about design standards. And the article, it's stringent regulations restrict affordability and choice. And three of the points that really stood out to me is restrictive design standards can be viewed as a violation of due process. They go into detail there. A takings clause of the First Amendment. And the third one is architectural aesthetics can be a violation of the First Amendment, limiting a home builder's expression of their own home design. Mm-hmm. So those are things of concern when you talk about, property rights and things like that. So
I think what you brought up is, and this we've talked about this as an organization, and Mayor Loddick, sort of charged myself and others to put together a task force. I'm not sure what detail they'll go into, but it clearly is just to sit down and say, if these three communities do this in development, why don't we? Or vice versa. They don't require, but we do. What is there in there that's going to help streamline things and want folks to develop here in town? So it'll be a positive event. I think it's just a matter of sitting down and finding out, the good, bad, and the ugly, and let's try to approach it. And you folks will see that. I mean, if they want you to pull something because you have to do X, Y, and Z to build a house, it'll be up to you folks to decide and vote on that for sure.
Just to clarify quick, is that the conversation we've had around just looking at our development process, step by step, the improvements we can make, and getting feedback from developers? Is that what you were talking with that piece? Okay.
Yep, the developers. And I'll give you one quick example because a friend of mine mentioned it at lunch. There is a screw inspection for drywall. My buddy's a drywaller. And so they put drywall up all over the place. And you have to have everything in line, electric, and then I'm totally talking out of my head here, but all those things have to be in place.
Sure.
And it seems like when it gets to the end, they do the screw inspection. They literally count the screws of the drywall. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not going to argue with anybody over here. It's in the books. That's what Cedar Falls requests. So if we can lighten up on that, it'll make my drywall buddy happier and timing be better.
Anything that would streamline.
Yeah. I think that'll be the gist of it.
So.
Any other council comments, questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Geffel.
Jim, I'm not trying to bust your chops on this. We talked a little bit about contract last year. The written summary report did you already send that in? Shane has that as well, correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I won't go into the further detail on those bullet points, but that's the standing contract we have for your guys' reimbursement, correct?
Right.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Anyone else?
Thanks for your service, folks. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim. All right, we will now move on to item number 2, Council Conflict of Interest Forum. We have an update presentation from Manager Bailey Schindel. Thank you, Bailey.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. If you guys recall, we talked about the conflict of interest forms as a referral item back in March, but it seems like it was just yesterday. I can't believe it was that long ago. At that meeting, if you recall, we reviewed the current conflict of interest form for elected officials. And we discussed why that form is important in helping the city stay compliant with audit purposes as well as a couple of state codes. The instruction to staff following that meeting was to come up with a more robust conflict of interest form for our elected officials, potentially including the most common conflict of interest areas, which includes employment and activities, income from properties, and participation in boards and commissions. The revised elected official conflict of interest form, which is included in your guys' packet, includes those areas and is up for discussion tonight at council. So with that, I'll pass it back to council for any questions or discussion.
Thank you, Bailey. And open up council discussion. This is just that follow-up from our last conversation on this. I know, Aaron, I know you had a few things on it, but kind of open it up to everyone.
Me first?
And I do want to clarify, just for everyone watching as well, this is just for the council. This is not a conflict of interest policy for staff, for boards and commissions. This is really just reviewing a conflict of interest policy for us up here, for council and mayor.
No, I appreciate the form as it's put together. I think it gets, for the most part, at the heart of what I was looking for was that the disclosure form that we had in the past or currently have is really lacking sufficient detail. I think of the issue as kind of twofold. First of all, it's a council person's responsibility to recuse themselves. Ultimately, they're the ones that make that call. The reason for the form is to let the public know what the relationships are, business relationships, real estate, that sort of thing, that individual has, so that there's a disagreement about whether or not there should have been a recusal. That can help inform the voting public. Towards that end, the language is fine in the form as I see it, except for Section 2. My quibble with this is, it says, please list any employment or activity that would conflict with your official duties and responsibilities. The problem with that is that it's impossible to have a crystal ball and to know what issues are going to come before us. I think that section should read more akin to what Sections 3 and others are, which is simply just state your employment or income activity or something of that nature, so that people know where your money's at. Otherwise, I think the form's pretty close to being good.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
I feel the same
Councilmember
way.
Dunn.
I think that's a great thing to point out, and I feel like we should simplify it and just make it clear just to state where you're employed at. And your spouse, right? Yes.
Mr. Mayor? Yep. Yeah, on this one, I'm of the opinion that we've had a form and an agreement that has worked for decades. I guess I'm thinking a little bit that this is a solution in search of a problem, unless it's a bit of a witch hunt, and I'm not trying to insinuate that it is. It just feels like we can continue to hold ourselves to that conflict of interest without having to report all the extra personal information that requires. If the code doesn't require it, I'd say keeping the status quo is just as safe. However, we just had in the last term, the mayor actually policed that form not being completed by a council person. That's the right way to address any problems that exist. So if that's the problem that we're trying to prevent or address, there's a method for it. So I guess I'd be in favor of keeping the status quo, but I'll comply with whatever council decides.
Mr. Mayor.
Lila.
Bailey, did we look at any of any other cities' forms to see where we add up now versus would this be more in line with what other similar sized communities are doing? Are we lacking what we have now versus maybe what someone else has?
That's a good question. We did look into a handful of other cities and similar sized cities on this issue, and we didn't get a lot of great feedback regarding the matter. I would say that I think Dubuque and Waterloo have a little bit more robust, where you're actually stating out your related party conflicts. The other ones that we found either just had like a personnel policy or a more generic state your conflicts. But again, not a lot of feedback. Those were the few that I did get.
Sure. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor. Councilmember Cruz.
Bailey, you mentioned that there was an ordinance or something that we had to do this?
And that was part of the presentation back in March. So if you recall, there's 2 state codes. They're mentioned in the policy here, actually.
Right.
68B, that requires the employment piece. You need to state your employment. And then the 362.2 is a state code that you must relate, or you must disclose any financial interests that you may have in any businesses that do work with a city.
Sure,
in
for
any
public
sort of manner.
contracts,
Correct.
that sort of thing. I did a legal review outside of city staff, and interestingly, it pointed out that based on a review of Iowa statutes, City of Cedar Falls City Code, there is no statute or ordinance that authorizes creation of a conflict of interest form, disclosure form. It is used to bolster public trust, which makes sense, but just repeating what legal review I had. You know, a conflict of interest disclosure is a good practice. It's expected. In my world as a financial planner, it's very intense. Do what's in the best interest of the client at all times. There's no gray area. That's how I do my work on council when I visit with people, visit with citizens. Some of this almost gets to the point of an invasion of privacy, to be honest. You know, when you're disclosing dollars of income, I mean, you can say you make income from a certain place, but I don't know that you can go to the extent of saying how much money a person makes and from where.
Just to check quick, I don't think we have anywhere on here you have to disclose the amount you make.
It says over 1,000 somewhere in here for,
Yeah, so you would know it's over 1,000 if they disclose it, but
yeah.
at least you're not saying the amount.
One question, section 5, boards and commissions. Is that then boards and commissions within Cedar Falls? Because if I'm in a board or commission, say the Farm Bureau spokesman or Farm Bureau, I mean, that doesn't,
I would assume Cedar Falls is our top priority there. Kevin, would you have any legal reason that we would need other city board and commissions?
First, I'll say, had I been asked, I would have said there's no legal requirement to have a form. This is a way of disclosing information to the public. Second of all, when it says boards and commissions, it means all boards and commissions, not just City of Cedar Falls boards and commissions. We don't know in advance which of those might create a problem.
Mr. Mayor? Oh, sorry.
then I'd follow up as how do you determine there's a problem? I mean, it's kind of scout's honor to disclose, is what my understanding is in the legal research I've done.
As was stated, the ultimate decision as to whether there's a personal conflict is for the elected official, but there are certain legal conflicts of interest that you must recuse on, and this is a way of listing those so that folks have oversight if they wish to use the oversight.
Just to clarify quick, I will agree with what you're saying on, there is no legal reason that we can force anybody up here to sign this, to put your information down. This really is more of a transparency tool for this council, like you were saying, Daryl, and they're just to bolster the faith with the community. So this really is more the discussion on just whether we, from a standpoint of the relationship for transparency with the community as a body, saying we'd like to recommend we follow. But again, there's no enforcement mechanism to really say anybody has to sign this.
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
Having done our personality assessments last week, I learned that I'm a devil's advocate debater. So just playing devil's advocate here, if we've got some border commission issues here, I guess I take a little bit of concern with the fact that we're nonpartisan positions. If you have to list all of your, what you're performing in a volunteer capacity, let's say I'm on the executive committee of the local Democratic convention. Now I have to list that so people out there know it's no longer a nonpartisan position. You know what I mean? I'll also go on record and state I don't own any property in the city besides my residence, so I have no dog in this fight. I just think it is a little bit more than need be. And again, that the honor system is a little bit lax and can be dodged. I don't know if censorship would be an option to enforce somebody who's not abiding by their conflict of interest protocols, but I think the simple statement like we've used in the past of these are the potential conflicts of interest I might have. I know the aim at this is to help new incoming electeds to think through what all might be a potential conflict and help us be really transparent. So I guess I'm in favor of that spirit of it. Again, I just think there might be a couple extra sections that we don't need, in particular that all boards and commissions could be over-divulging.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Lala.
Yep. Admittedly, maybe not with this council, but I heard ad nauseum over the last handful of years about a lack of transparency, a lack of anything else. I don't look at anything here and go, gosh, this is going to make me lose sleep. I mean, if I have to, I don't have, same as Councilman Gamfield, I don't own any other property other than my home. But if I did, and if I have to report that I own something that's going to give me in excess of $1,000, that's fine. I think the the intent behind this is to be as open and honest with what you have skin in the game for. So from my vantage point, I think what we have now is probably lacking. This is better. We can wordsmith it however everybody feels comfortable with, but I don't want to hear from anybody else sitting up here or from anyone else in the public that we have a transparency issue as an elected body. And to me, this helps with that. So I don't see an issue.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I want
Councilman
to
Hall.
make sure we go around first, but a couple things. I mean, that's precisely why I brought this forward, was that you have to remember the current form just says, do you have a conflict? That's really about it, okay? It requires no disclosure whatsoever for anybody else to be able to examine whether or not my judgment's correct about whether or not I have a judgment. And so I take issue with calling it a conflict of interest form. That's not really what it is. It's a disclosure form that ultimately can highlight potential conflicts of interest. That's the transparency that we're looking for. And so I find it difficult that this is objectionable in any way. And I do disagree that it's hunting for a problem. I mean, that doesn't exist. The reality is that form that we currently signed is so inadequate, it's meaningless. So if we want to have transparency, then we should have a form that provides that, as opposed to one that just provides lip service to it.
Just wanted to make the space. If you
I
had-
echo Councilman Latta that, to me, and really, I think Councilman Ganfield, Councilman Hawbaker, I'm not concerned about, I would be more concerned that I hadn't disclosed something just because I maybe wasn't thinking about what could be possible. I'd rather just disclose everything, and it's probably never going to be a problem, but I'd feel a whole heck of a lot better as a human if I just laid it out for everyone to see.
Mr. Mayor? Yeah, when I was filling out the form for planning and zoning, I had a conversation then that it is better to, over disclose or, in a situation say, do I need to recuse myself from this? And then let your peers decide. I would feel much more confident in having the information and saying, no, that's fine. You're welcome to stay up here and vote on that. I don't feel that that's a conflict. So I would be in favor of, yes, giving more information so that folks know where their elected officials stand.
Mr. Mayor, what are we looking to do with this tonight?
So then what we would be looking to do is give staff direction to either move forward with finalizing this, and this is something that we would bring back to council for an actual approval. I've got some notes here of things everyone's discussed. Like you mentioned, section 2, looking at just changing it to essentially saying state, please list any employment or activity within your official duties, responsibilities. So then we would probably look for, and we can do a vote if we feel necessary, just to direction the staff to bring back a finalized version of this for discussion and potential approval at council. And so if everyone's in any more comments, discussion, then we'll just look for a quick show of hands. Those in favor of directing staff to move forward with bringing this to council? And those opposed? I think that's 4-2, so that does approve. So then we will look to give staff direction and to bring back this form at council meeting. Ron?
Just one clarification, Mayor.
Yeah.
That includes the changes in section 2, I'm assuming.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
And then that we will still have the chance at that council meeting to discuss if there's any final changes or edits that we're looking for on it. Fair. Councilmember Law.
One final question. When this is put forth, at what cadence would this form be filled out? And would this be something that when it is brought forward in its final version, if it's approved by council by vote, we would fill this out in relatively short order? We would fill this out beginning next calendar year? What does that look like?
So this is an annual form. So I believe this would kind of replace our current annual
So this would be-
requirement. I don't know, we didn't really discuss, would we be looking to have everyone fill this out immediately after? Again, it's a voluntary thing, so we'd be probably giving the option of asking everybody to fill it out as an updated form that we're implementing at this point.
But then keep it on the same annual
Yeah,
track.
and still, yeah,
Sure.
stay on the same annual
I
beginning
think
of the
we
year.
all love personal quizzes, so, yep.
Appreciate the clarification. Thanks.
Any other questions, comments, discussion? All right, seeing none, we will adjourn the committee of the whole meeting, and we will reconvene here at 7 o'clock for our normal city council meeting. Thank you, everyone.